Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzis here with co-host Carrie Alavel. Today, we're going to be talking about messaging, about the Democratic Party's messaging heading into the 2022 midterm elections. Carrie, this is a topic that you just love to write about, to talk about, to think about.
Well, yeah, and I mean, part of the reason is that it seems like Democrats, for a while at least, and maybe they're coming around, have really backed away from any attacks on the Republican Party. And as we keep noting here, in my writing, other activists keep noting it. There's just so many issues on which Republicans have handed them amazing stuff. Ranging anywhere from January 6th and Trump, likely having committed crimes to, Madison Cawthorn's orgy, GOP orgies. And, I mean, like there's the real stuff. And then there's the oh my God, these people are nutsoid stuff. Right. So, there's like federal judge rulings. There's Washington, DC scuttlebutt where one of their own rats them out. I mean, it just it goes on and on.
Yeah, there's a lot of material to work with. I mean, last week's episode, we had on from Media Matters, we had Angelo Carusone, who talked about what Republicans, a cultural war things that Republicans are using, this grooming children, right? Because God forbid they find out that gay people exist, that's grooming them. And so there's this big sort of debate whether inside the Democratic Party, whether you take that head on and you respond to it, or you ignore it. And so our guest today is she's going to be on in about 10, 15 minutes. It's going to be Jennifer Fernndez Ancona. She's an old friend of mine. She has been, she spent years working in women donor networks. She's a fundraiser. And she's still doing a lot of that work, but she's also a master messenger. And she's a co-founder of Way to Win, which is an organization, as she describes it, that tries to get Democrats to be Democrats, like what the Democratic Party should be. She is also a co-founder of Way to Lead PAC, and I'm sure she'll want to talk a little bit about the work they are doing. But she had the organization she's been with, they've been doing some polling, some research into the kind of messaging that motivates and activates people ahead of 2022. And we'll be, I mean, I don't want to steal her thunder and talk about what she's going to talk about. But the idea is, like you just said, is that it's a target-rich environment. And why are we not engaging with that? Democrats are always defensive. They're always afraid to hit Republican attacks head on. There's almost a feeling, Carrie, that, oh my God, what do they know that I don't know? Trans people using bathrooms. What do they know that I don't know?
I know.
And then they get all fearful.
And the other thing that's really, wild about it is how rarely these, I know everybody harkens back to 2004, 2006 and the anti-gay marriage amendments, right, that swept through the states. Everybody quotes that as gospel, that won George W. Bush's second term. I'll tell you who doesn't quote that as gospel is Karl Rove, is Ken Mailman, right? The people running the GOP strategy don't think that's what it was. They think it was a national security election. That's why he won
9/11
re-election, right? Yeah. So, but everybody quotes that as gospel. You can go back, you can look at the states that George W. Bush picked up, and they didn't even have constitutional amendments, the anti-gay constitutional amendments on the ballot. There's no, anyone who's really dug into the numbers, there's no conclusive evidence that that's true. But nonetheless, since then, this idea that Republicans are winning on culture war issues just creeps up again and again and again. And I got to tell you, the transgender attacks, okay, it's a slightly different angle this time. Because it's targeted at trans athletes and specifically female trans athletes, but they haven't won anything on trans stuff in forever. Like every Texas decided to cut loose on trans stuff in 2018 because they realized that it was not working for them. Now, I don't know. They probably, I'm sure they've introduced bills since then on the trans athlete stuff. You want to take, North Carolina Republican Governor Pat McCrory in 2016. That was a banner year for Republicans. They won everywhere. Guess who got kicked out of office that year? GOP Governor McCrory, who signed the original bathroom bill, right? The
his campaign was revolved around it. It wasn't even he just signed. That was his core issue.
Right. That was his core issue. And I don't think he really wanted it to be his core issue, but it became his core issue because he couldn't avoid it. And he was kicked out of office because of it. Right.
Now, that's actually a good
narrow,
point.
but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is a red state too. I mean, yeah, it's purplish, right? But it's a 3 to 4 point Republican state in a Republican year and a Democrat one. But that's a good point. I just really want to hone in on what you said. It's like, you don't think he wanted to talk about that, right? And this idea that Republicans are onto something really is not, it's demonstrably false. And it really is their base dragging them to where they don't want to be. And we're seeing this a lot with Donald Trump, right? He is this sort of core embodiment. And he's promoting people like Herschel Walker that are just fringe crank Senate candidates. And in a year that should lean Republican just because of historic trends, he's really giving us a fighting chance in a lot of these Senate races, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the investments, the Democratic super PAC that's aligned with Chuck Schumer and the McConnell aligned super PAC for Republicans, they just made their initial investments, right? Their initial ad buys for reserving space so that they can make sure they have enough, action in August through the fall, through November. And if you look at where Republicans are putting their money, a lot of it is they're playing defense. They're playing defense on, in North Carolina to preserve that seat, in Pennsylvania to preserve that seat. They're pouring a boatload of money into Georgia. And to me, it's not a sign of strength. It's a sign of weakness. They think they have to carry Herschel Walker across the finish line there because it's their best pickup chance in Georgia. And they're putting 30. They've already reserved $37 million. I guarantee you it will not stop there. And that's just a super PAC, right? That's an outside group. That's not McConnell's Senate majority, Senate minority PAC, whatever. I can't remember what they're all called. But anyway, so the Senate majority PAC is actually Democratic and the Senate Leadership Fund is the Republican PAC. But what I'm saying is there's going to be a lot more money, but their biggest investment by far of that outside group was in Georgia. And right now, Herschel Walker is polling okay. He's a couple points ahead of Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. But first of all, Warnock is raising money hand over fist, and he hasn't even started to go to work on Herschel Walker yet. And Herschel Walker has just a boatload of personal baggage. So if you look at where these outside groups are putting their money, the Republicans are pouring a ton of money into Georgia because they have to carry Herschel Walker across the finish line there in hopes of a pickup. And then they're playing a whole lot of defense, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, et cetera, in order to try and keep the seats that could be troublesome for them. So,
yeah, and I just want to, before people start freaking out too much, Republicans led in the polling in Georgia in the general election in 2020 and in the runoff election as well. The reason Democrats won is because of massive turnout in southwestern Georgia, which is rural Black counties. And these are people that are traditionally undercounted by polling, right? So the fact that it's, a couple of points ahead, nobody's going to pretend that it's anything less than a tied race at this point. But your point really stands. Democrats actually haven't started really picking apart Herschel Walker. And again, target rich environment. I feel like we're going to keep saying that because Republicans are doing everything in their power to make this a competitive season. Donald Trump included, just his big footing and big mouth. I mean, they are and this is something I definitely want to talk to Jennifer about, is how much does that make it a referendum between Trump and Biden as opposed to just a referendum on Biden?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and that's what she's talking about. We'll get into it a little bit. We've talked about this before. We've mentioned it, but I don't think we've gone into good detail on it. Is this idea that you have to have a hero and a villain in every story. And if Democrats are just talking about their, about their accomplishments, and they're trying to sell themselves solely on their accomplishments, there's no hero and villain in that story. It's just, do you like what Democrats have done, versus do you like what Democrats are doing? And would you like it if Republicans were in charge right now? Just think if Trump were president right now and the war in Ukraine had unfolded under his watch. I mean, I just can't imagine what a debacle that would be, and how quickly we would be shifting toward siding with authoritarianism, as our democracy
Trump would want to send
itself
arms
slid
to
that way.
Russia. Yeah,
Totally. He's just like unbelievable. But anyway, thank God we're not in that situation, is all I have to say.
No, absolutely. So that's not just the only race. Trump is bigfooted into Ohio, and now the Ohio Republican Party seems to be in a all-out civil war, including the base is not happy. You've written about that.
Yeah, well, the base is not happy. And I have to say, so I've written about it. This is a similar scenario to what's happening in Pennsylvania.
You love this story. You love it.
I've written more about this in Pennsylvania. So let me pick apart Pennsylvania a little bit, because I it's just a slightly more knowledgeable on all the scuttlebutt, right? Which is that Trump decided at the last minute. Remember, Trump's already endorsed once in Pennsylvania. He endorsed a alleged wife abuser who had to drop out of the race after he lost custody of his children, right?
Imagine a Republican dropping out because, like, at this point, because wife beating is not a good enough reason to drop out. Sexual assault's not a good enough reason. They gain points.
No, they gain points. I mean, just imagine, like, how bad was the stuff that came out in that, in that marriage dispute about Sean Parnell, that he was like, I think I'm just out of here. And he just dropped out. Right. So Trump is already like misfired once, misfire one. Oh, whoops. And then it's like, okay. So he's like, now everybody was like, just stay out, right? Let the primary happen. I think it happens on May 24th, 27th, something like that. So in Pennsylvania. So, we're not that far away. He could just hang out and wait for it to happen. I think David McCormick, who is a business person, more reasonable typically, but also has like sold his soul to try and get Trump's endorsement, has been going head to head with TV huckster Dr. Mehmet Oz, right? And Trump decided, instead of staying out because he'd already misfired once, he just wanted to take another shot. And so he endorsed Oz, and the base went crazy. I mean, like, former Owen anchors were like, why is he doing this? Roger Stone weighed in with something negative. Something's gone weird between Stone and Trump. God only knows, but like, Eric Erickson, I mean, just a whole bevy of conservative radio hosts, right wingers, etc. The base sort of exploded about, why did you pick Oz? He's a total huckster. He's a carpetbagger. He's like, no one thinks he's MAGA enough. And this is who Trump picks.
And he's brown too.
Oh God, not that.
Yeah. No, you think race doesn't have a factor? And he's Turkish, I believe, right?
It's I think so. So I mean, the whole thing is it's just a disaster for the Republican Party, trying to like preserve that seat, make sure that it doesn't, because it was held by Pat Toomey, who is a Republican. And Democrats have a reasonably good shot of picking up that seat. They have a couple good, candidates there. But the thing that was so funny was the Washington Post did a piece on the reason that Trump decided to endorse Dr. Oz. And then, and one of the things that it came down to was, I mean, Trump told one of his aides, well, I'm a gambler. So, he's just like rolling the dice a second time in Pennsylvania, who knows? But the other thing he said was that his aide said that he likes to watch people's numbers go down when he endorses their opponent.
Dear God. Oh my God.
You know,
No, nope,
not
no.
not vetting, just the sheer pleasure, the sadistic pleasure he gets out of like watching someone's numbers plummet because he endorsed their opponent. I mean, talk about Mitch McConnell like ripping out what's left of his hair right now. So it's just like, and the same thing really is playing out very similarly in Ohio. It's a little bit more, the race isn't quite as clean cut, but it's very similar.
So
he just endorsed JD Vance there. JD Vance over over Josh Mandel, who was like kind of seen
loony.
as right, loony, but he was seen as like the real Trumpy guy, right?
Because he is.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Time those are related.
So once again, I mean, and look, if this thing really starts to go sideways for Republicans, Tim Ryan, who I'm pretty sure is going to be the Democratic nominee there, right? He's got a chance of making that a real race, even though it's Ohio. Even though it's
outside
Ohio.
chance, but you're right. There's an outside chance, and depending on how the winds shift, it could become competitive. And even if Republicans have to now spend $40 million defending Ohio, that's a win in more of the closely contested states. So Carrie, it's time to bring on our guest. She is Jennifer Fernndez Ancona. She's an old friend. She lives right here near me. She's also a neighbor. Known her from the Netroots back in the Netroots Nation, and she is the co-founder of Way to Win. Mm-hmm. And she's also, I think you're a co-founder of Way to Lead PAC as well. Mm-hmm. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to see you both.
So Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about your origin story? Like we consider our guests to be superheroes, and there's a reason you are where you are today. What was that path that put you in this path towards activism and fighting for our country's democracy? And talk a little bit about your organizations today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out actually as a journalist. I was originally a news reporter. I worked at the LA Times, and I thought I would always be a journalist because I loved it. I loved talking to people, getting information, and putting the story together. But I was actually quite radicalized during the Bush presidency, the W. Bush presidency, the 9/11 response.
How quaint, right?
Right? I know. Back in the day, which seemed really bad, but now seems fine, right?
Right.
But was just very kind of taken with the protests around the war in Iraq and the Bush response. I just felt very moved to actually get into politics. So I left my job as a journalist, and as you know, too, got involved in Howard Dean's campaign. That was my first campaign that got me into politics as a volunteer. And then because I had a writing and comms background, I ended up doing a lot of communications work, both for inside the government. I worked for the California Assembly for a while, and then outside organizations. So I've always been a communicator and kind of a movement builder. I come from a split family, and my mother's family is from El Salvador. My father's family was from the South in Tennessee. And so I've always,
El Salvador, not Tennessee, but Tennessee, okay.
El Salvador. Have been just like a bridge builder. I've been a bridge builder from the time I was a child, and I think that's continuing what I continue to like to do, and ended up doing a lot of multiracial coalition building. I thought that was one of the most important things that we needed to do. In a diverse community of the Democratic Party, we need to be doing more multiracial coalition building. So then, as you said, I went to work for the Women Donors Network for about 10 years. I got into donor organizing by working for Steve Phillips, who you also know, I think, who wrote the book Brown is the New White. Worked for him and got into that world of major donor organizing. And for me, it was really important. Why I spent so much time at WDN is because in this world of progressive movement building, where the money comes from is really important. Like how the money is organized is an upstream way of actually influencing the ultimate outcomes of the movement. So I found a lot of great satisfaction in working at that donor level. And I did that at the Women Donors Network for about 10 years. And then Trump got elected, and
and you were radicalized again, anew.
Once again.
I'm still triggered. Still, too
the
soon.
women donors, I know. They had been doing like a lot of philanthropy, you know, nonpartisan work. They had been doing more on the kind of foundation side of things. And so we knew, you know, like this isn't going to cut it. We know that with Trump being elected, if we're going to beat that back, there has to be a political strategy. And so I ended up meeting two other women, Leah Hunt Hendricks, who also was running a different progressive donor network, and then Tori Gavito, who was running the Texas Future Project. And she was really building a strategy for how you could turn Texas blue over 10 years, which was really a strategy about expanding the electorate, you know, changing who you're talking to by bringing more people into the process through organizing, essentially. So Leah, Tori, and I brought our superpowers together, and we formed Way to Win to say, let's since we all agree, let's build one strategy together, put donors into it. Because our donors were all wanting to do something that was going to last beyond a given election cycle. They were tired of giving and giving to candidate campaigns and then feeling like they weren't getting anything from it. You know, it just goes away at the end of the election. So they were wanting to build more lasting infrastructure. And we wanted to do it in a real political strategy context. And so we formed Way to Win. Since we did that, the three of us, women-led organization, we moved over $200 million to the field since 2017. Yeah, to grassroots community-based organizations doing this year-round organizing. And we focused on, oh, go ahead.
Why would you do that instead of just plowing all of that money into advertising? In the last 2 months of a campaign. No, just kidding. Sorry.
No. I mean, it's true, right? Because a lot of our tactics have been just too short term. Now, I believe in advertising, so we'll talk about that later. I believe in the role of advertising, but it has to be done hand in hand with the deep organizing. For me, it's really those two things going together is when we win, which we did see happening in Georgia. So anyway, so Way to Win, we've been around for that long. We've been organizing donors into this strategy. We've been doing this funding, and we focus on about 10 states. And a lot of our states are in the South and Southwest, where demographic change is really fueling this possibility for more political change. So it's the Stacey Abrams strategy, just like expanded out to more places where we can shift power, like Texas, North Carolina, and Florida. And, you know, and we don't look away from Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Those are all important too, especially around building multiracial coalition between all of us, you know, whether we're white, Black, Latino, Asian, etc. So.
Well, that's really exciting stuff. I have to admit, I've been looking at some of Way to Win stuff, specifically in terms of messaging. So I'm not as familiar with, you know, exactly where you're pushing money towards and whatever, but I've been interested because your message seems to be to Democrats, hey, let's get a little more aggressive here. I know it's not in your DNA, but we can't shy away from this stuff. And in particular, you talked to Greg Sargent from the Washington Post for an article, and you said, look, every story has to have a hero and a villain, and you have to paint Republicans as a villain. And I was like, yes, doing, you know, a little happy dance. So tell us a little bit about what kind of messaging, ideas you came up with for this particular midterm, right? And how you came to those. I know you guys did some polling too. So just paint a picture for us of where you are now based on what you've learned.
Definitely. So yes, you're right. Like in addition to all of this grassroots organizing that we have been funding, we really saw in 2020 very clearly that we also needed much more work on messaging. That
2018, 2016, 2014, 2012, 2010. Have we
exactly.
ever?
Have we ever not? No, it's true. But it just became very clear. You know, there was a part of us that thought, oh, we can get people organized, you know, it'll work. But it doesn't work if you don't have the air war going together with the ground war, you know, kind of both of them working together. So we created this new capacity at Way to Win called the Midterm Message Project. So it's kind of like an R&D project that we created in order to figure this out and to influence others. You know, that's what part of why we didn't do that press, and we've been briefing people, is we're trying to influence the Democratic Party and other folks who are doing this messaging work as well. So we actually spent almost the entire year last year diving in, doing a lot of research, both quantitative quantitative and qualitative, listening to voters. And we really were like wanting to understand, we know that who elected Biden. It was a multiracial coalition, right? It was a multi-generational coalition. We couldn't have won any state with just white voters or with just older voters. All of it was needed, right, to actually win. So what makes them tick? Not only them as individual groups, but kind of how do you find a message that resonates across the whole? Because that's one of the things that we find is that in Democratic messaging, one of the challenges is just how much it's sliced and diced by different audiences and very like micro targeted, and it kind of misses the forest for the trees. And that's really what the GOP does so well. This idea of telling a story, like telling one strong, emotionally resonant story over and over and over again, because we know repetition also matters, that would actually work well across ideology. So we want to be getting our liberal, activists excited about what we're saying. We don't want to turn them off because we need them to help us turn out the vote. But then we also want to persuade folks who are a little bit more in the middle. So that's what we were really trying to do with our message framework, or with our message project.
Which I have to say, that is a tall order. I mean, one of the reasons that it's so easy for Republicans in a way is because for the most part, they really are just targeting white Americans. I mean, that is like the main thing that they're doing. So it's easier to tell the coherent story that you think resonates in the focus groups and the polling and whatever. Like you come up with the narrative that you think is gonna, and particularly in the midterms, they don't worry about swing voters. I mean, if you've noticed, like every single message they have is geared towards like a third of the electorate and is geared towards that their base to the exclusion of everybody else. They're not trying to get to 50+1. They're trying to rig the election so they don't have to get there. They're trying to suppress the vote, rig the election on the back end if they need to, but also and just turn out their people. They're trying to their people exclusively. So sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
It's okay. Well, but what's really interesting about this is that what we found is, there's kind of a scarcity mindset. In general, there's been a scarcity mindset in America, but it's really been amped up because of COVID, because of inflation. I mean, now with the war, like there's just a feeling of scarcity. And the right is really seizing on that with these, we call them status threat narratives, because it's all about fear of other groups, other classes, and fear of something being taken away from you, and also just fear of change in general. And there's a lot of change happening in the world, for legitimate reasons, and it's all for good, but there's a climate that creates this scarcity. So, but what we found is that while the right, we think their messaging has been mostly effective with white people, what we found in some of our research is that it has increasingly been more effective with communities of color as well, particularly with Black men, with Latino community, and with AAPI community. So it's something we have to be aware of, right? It's actually, the status threat is starting to pull apart our own coalition. And we know that, right, their numbers are such that they mostly have to win the white vote, and then they have to peel off a little bit around the edges. We don't have that project. We have the project of like a mostly equal parts, people of color and white coalition. We have to speak in a way that isn't going to throw one part of the coalition under the bus in order to serve the other, and that has really been a kind of standard Democratic practice, to your point, very much in contrast with the right strategy, which is a base engagement and mobilization strategy, which does work for them. Because at the end of the day, it's those people who are fired up, who are going to come and turn out, and then there's enough around the edges, right, for them to win. Like that, we saw that clearly happen in Virginia. So you have this problem with a scarcity. And so what I would say is, so through all of our testing, so we do polling. So we find out like where people are, we do qualitative, where we actually really listen to people in a deep way. Like we do these really long panels, online panels, where people answer questions and you really get to read underneath the why behind why they think a thing. We've done a ton of focus groups. So we take all that in to just understand where people are at. And then based on, we look at the research on what works. We listen to Anat Shenker-Osorio, we listen to all of the experts who are telling us what works. And then we make ads, 30-second ads usually, because it really forces you to crystallize your argument. And then we test those ads in on a tool called called Swayable, where it's a randomized controlled trial test. So it's sort of like a poll. They watch the ad, they see the survey, there's a control group. So you can then see how does this message move people across different demographics. So that's like a lot of the quantitative data that we have. So we did this throughout all of 2021. We tested our messages. We also tested the opposition's messages that we see, you know, all of the GOP ads, and we tested a lot of our other kind of Democratic allied counterparts ads to see what's going on. And where we really landed, which you mentioned, talked about in that Greg Sargent piece, is this idea that this is a contrast election. So you can think about for 2008, that was a yes election. It was like, yes, we want this new hope and change. You know, 2020 was a no election. It was like, no, we do not want this guy to continue to be the president. So, but this cannot be just a yes or just a no election because of where people are. We need to give them we need to start actually with a positive, concrete sort of like, this is what Democrats have done. Because number one, people don't know what Democrats have done, even though we want Democrats to have done more. They have done a lot of good things. That the governing, like you said, that we're doing is much better than we would see with the Republicans. But nobody gets that. These voters don't know it. They're not connecting those dots at all. So we need to be really clear, like, here's who we are, here's what we do here, you know, and really get our own side in the argument, not be mealy-mouthed about it.
I don't know why the voters aren't reading the congressional record to see all the great legislation that we're passing.
Exactly. No, it's not getting through, right? And part of it is because we're not even telling the story. So tell the story, shout it from the rooftops, like say what we've done in concrete terms that actually resonate with people, like creating the best economy that we've seen in 50 years for workers. You know, they're taking a charge of COVID and doing the best we can, all these millions of people being vaccinated. There's a lot we can work with. But then the contrast has to come in. That's like, these guys are extreme. Like this is where we brought in the attack on the January 6th, the attack on the Capitol. It's trying to overturn election results, you know, with violence. That's just one of the extreme ways that they're, you know, what they're doing. They're against masks and vaccines. They're trying to burn books, like kind of throwing out all the ways that they're extreme. Just limiting the woman's right to choose was huge for people. They don't even know. People don't even get what is actually at stake and a threat right now. So there has to be a contrast. And this is where I feel like our work has been so important, because that it hasn't been happening. I mean, and I know you guys have talked about this, but the Republicans are just getting off scot-free. They are not getting blamed for any of this stuff. There has not been enough attack on them out there in the paid media landscape at all. And it's just mind-blowing because there is so much to work with. I think what they have done has gone too far, but they're getting away with it. But they don't have to. You know, we actually need to talk about it.
What do you think? So if you were to take the top two issues that you think Democrats should be touting, and then the top two Achilles heels for Republicans, what would they be?
Yeah. I think for Democrats,
in 2 words or less. 2 words.
Well, it's the job.
Too
It's
much?
the jobs. Job creation, you know, the recovery from the recession, COVID aid, you know, infrastructure. Those are like words, you know.
Gotcha.
That's the best. Jobs is one, better jobs, with millions of jobs with better pay and better benefits and better hours. People love that. They want to know that that's been happening. The really concrete benefits that people they're also feeling in their own lives. In terms of the Achilles heels, it's like trying to overturn the election results with violence, for sure. Trying to divide us by pitting parents against teachers, banning books, burning books, attacking the freedom to vote, attacking a woman's right to choose what to do with her own body. Those are the big ones. But then
who responds? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let me just say one more thing, because it's like the final piece of the puzzle is like, who's the hero of the story? And when we talked about, you know, the hero, it's the voters, right? It's this coalition of voters, the collective of voters who came out in record numbers, who delivered this election in 2020 and can do it again. That has to be the hero of the story. Is talking about Democrats is good, but you can't just say Biden is the hero or these elected people are the hero. We really need to elevate like us, the collective voter, as the hero.
So we had Ian Haney Lopez on the show maybe a month or two ago. He's a professor at Cal. He's written a book about, and he's also Salvadoreño. So, oh my God, there's like little cabal of us sharing a Cal form. And it was very similar. It was sort of this multiracial component. It was very much that there's a villain, which is, I forget the exact words that he used, but it was sort of an economic system that was really designed to screw into, people, and we can overcome that with a multiracial coalition. And his whole approach was to move beyond the inherent racism in the Republican message that is so appealing to a lot of working class white people.
Yeah.
When you talk about these negatives like January 6th violence and choice, and that it resonates, who is it resonating with? And I think that's sort of related to what the electorate is going to look like in 2022 this year, because it's not going to be the electorate of 2020. So talking about the 2020 electorate, unfortunately, we're not going to have that this year. There's going to be drop off. What is that? Who is that message activating, engaging? Does it give us a chance to hold on to some of these votes that otherwise would fall off on the midterm?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and you're right, it's different with a midterm, but when you look at the 2018 midterm turnout, it was also sky high compared to other midterm turnouts. So there is a new voter that came
We had a
out
great villain.
Yeah,
the best villain.
Yeah, we did. But I think we can turn that villain, like we can use the energy around that villain, but we can run against MAGA. We can run against that faction. It doesn't have to be just Trump. That's why we say like MAGA Republicans. I mean, that is something we can talk about, right? So when I say this message works, like when we did our testing, our CT testing, that message, which I can say, President Biden and Democrats are getting the balance right, fighting COVID, delivering the best economy for workers in 50 years. But some extreme Republicans are trying to divide us, overturning election results with violence, pitting parents against teachers, limiting the freedom to vote, even burning books. America rejected chaos and division in 2020. We can do it again. So, and it is in the ad with that 30 seconds, works across very liberal, moderate liberal, and moderates. It actually motivates them to want to vote. It also improves their approval of Biden by almost 4 points. Wow. And one of the important things that we find is that it also demobilizes the conservative vote, which is what we want. We want them to see a message, and then we want them to say, ooh, like, yeah, I'm conflicted. Like, maybe I don't want to vote. That's what we call it, the fire index, because we're looking for what motivates our side and motivates our moderates, and what demotivates conservatives. And what we found in a lot of the testing of other messages is that on the Democratic ally side is sometimes, they didn't move that needle at all. And sometimes they actually had a backlash effect. Ads that tout bipartisanship, which is a favorite thing for people. Guess what? It moves support for Republicans,
No.
God.
That is the bane of our existence, and for as long as I've been in politics.
Quick, hey, Walter, I just want to talk to our producer real quick. Can you get the White House on the line? We just want to talk to them real quick. Just the lower press shop. We don't need to talk to Psaki. We can just talk, just like. So is that? I mean, I don't know. I've got a lot of things that I want to do. So
I love it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, so some of these things are giving me hope, partly because first of all, just the idea that there's really tangible targets to go after is good. Right. It's a good start, right?
Yeah.
But then we have to get Democrats to act on them. Now, just assuming that Walter isn't able to get the White House on the line, that, what we have is a series of things that seem like they're coming down the pike that may actually back Democrats into a corner, right? The ruling on Roe v. Wade, the activist Supreme Court, the extreme Supreme Court seems completely poised to gut it, right?
Yeah.
And that is just going to force Democrats to have to come out on that issue. Yeah. Another thing that I think could happen, to your point about 1-6 is, I think talk about backing people into a corner. I think Liz Cheney has backed the panel, the January 6th panel, into the corner of having to prove that that at least I don't know if they're going to actually vote to make a criminal referral, but their report is probably going to prove one way or another that Trump broke the law, right?
Yeah.
That Trump committed criminal acts.
Yep.
So then hopefully it will be incumbent on every reporter, and this is what I would have done, to go around and ask, especially local reporters in these local races, do you support Trump? Do you think, do you continue to support him even though he committed criminal acts? In almost all of those, my guess is will probably say yes. All right. And I listened, this isn't all coming from me. I'm not a total genius. I was listening to Joe Lockhart on a podcast, and I was like, that makes so much sense. It's genius. He's a former press secretary for Clinton, I think. Anyway, but he said, look, basically all of those Republicans will probably say, yes, I support Trump, and I don't think he did it, or whatever they say. And he said that is a issue big enough for every Democratic candidate to drive a truck through if they choose to do it. So, these are issues that you mentioned that were targets in your messaging, in your polling or whatever. And I think Democrats are going to not only have the opportunity, but almost be forced into addressing them, and hopefully will do so with gusto.
I mean, absolutely. I think that's what we're trying to say. There is this sort of classic Dem response to be very afraid, right? To be afraid. And then there's a classic sort of like, we just need to talk about kitchen table issues. If we just focus on kitchen table issues, then we won't have to address these things that are hard. And what we're trying to say is like, that is not going to work. It has never worked. Like, I don't know that I can say that it's ever worked. Definitely not in the Trump era. And so they cannot get away with continuing to ignore this stuff. And in ignoring it, they're actually leaving so much power on the table, because it's not only something they may be forced to address, to your point, it actually helps us. Like what we found in our testing on the abortion piece, when we had this message that was like, here's all the great things we've done, here's how crazy they are. Not only are they attacking the Capitol, now they're trying to like get vigilantes to track down women who are trying to get health care. Every woman should have the right to her own autonomy. And then, when we share that message, it was one of our most mobilizing messages that we tested last year for our side. People see that and they're like, yeah, I want to get out there. I want to volunteer and vote. When all we give them is this like milk toast, I mean, we've been calling it kind of a mellow style of storytelling. It just falls flat, and it doesn't excite people, and it doesn't mobilize them. So
this is a perfect time. Oh, sorry. Do you want to do a quick follow-up? Because I was thinking about introducing that clip from the senator.
Do the clip.
Okay, so this is a perfect time because there is nothing mellow about this
I know,
clip.
I love it.
So we had a chance to clue Jennifer in on this just before, because our producer, who's probably talking to Jen Psaki right now, dropped it in our Slack channel just before, and I was like, let's get this queued up. So it's a 4-minute clip, but we're going to only play a minute of it. I just want to say we're not going to totally do justice to Senator Mallory McMurrow, state senator from Michigan, but she got accused by her opponent of being a groomer, supporting pedophilia, being, making white kids feel badly about being white because racism, et cetera. So she gets on, she has a chance to mull over this and decides to go take it to the Senate floor in Michigan. And here is her rebuttal of that.
I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom. I want my daughter to know that she is loved, supported, and seen for whoever she becomes. I want her to be curious, empathetic, and kind. People who are different are not the reason that our roads are in bad shape after decades of disinvestment, or that healthcare costs are too high, or that teachers are leaving the profession. I want every child in this state to feel seen, heard, and supported, not marginalized and targeted because they are not straight, white, and Christian. We cannot let hateful people tell you otherwise, to scapegoat and deflect from the fact that they are not doing anything to fix the real issues that impact people's lives. And I know that hate will only win if people like me stand by and let it happen. So I want to be very clear right now. Call me whatever you want. I hope you brought in a few dollars. I hope it made you sleep good last night. I know who I am. I know what faith and service means and what it calls for in this moment. We will not let hate win.
Reaction, Jennifer, to that? Was that a little less mellow than the?
Yeah. I mean, it's great because it really is classic of like when this stuff comes up, we have to say what we're for. We have to paint the picture of what it is we're trying to create. That has to be the first thing we do, which is what she did. I want my daughter to grow up feeling like herself, her full self. That is what we want for all of our children. That is how we should start every ad, right? That when someone is coming after us around this stuff. All of us believe that our children should be able to be free to be whoever they are. If we miss the step of saying what we're for and we go straight to a defense or we totally ignore it, we're not actually speaking to these real concerns people have. I mean, the outrage is kind of fake, but there is some real concern in there. We saw that in education. The outrage around CRT is kind of fake, but the people were really upset about their kids' schools, about COVID shutting down, about them having learning loss. Like there was real concern there. And in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe didn't really address it. He just kind of dismissed it and he tried to ignore this attack. So that's a classic. I loved seeing that because it's like a textbook example of what I'm talking about. Around we have to be strong and emotionally resonant with how we talk about this stuff. We have to say what we're for, and then the other thing she did, which is one of my principles, is to tack back to why they're doing it, like, and to make the connection of like, they're doing this to distract you from the fact that they who have been in charge here have done nothing to help you, to fix your roads, to make more investments. They are using this as a total tool to divide us so they can hoard all the resources for the rich and the wealthy.
Yeah, everybody
That is
complains
really
about the roads. I mean, that was almost brilliant because that's the
Brilliant.
most bipartisan issue possible. So
Yeah.
counterpoint.
That's
Counterpoint.
Yeah.
Hakeem Jeffries, congressman from New York. He's in the Democratic leadership. He's in the
I think
U.S.
that was
House.
a Freudian slip. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said no, we just need to ignore all these attacks that are accusing of being groomer pedophiliacs and talk about the economy. And I would almost have some sympathy if Democrats could talk about the economy, right?
Yeah.
But it's inflation, and you're like, oh well, inflation might come down in 6 months, instead of talking about all the record low jobs numbers, the purchasing power, rising wages, like all the things that actually, there's inflation, and that's a part of raising wages and an overheated economy as we emerge from the COVID lockdowns. But we can't even talk about kitchen table issues. Now we're like, okay, no, let's focus on the thing we can't talk about, but let's ignore the thing that they're using. I mean, there's no question. I'm just gonna throw it at you because
no, that's exactly right. But what I'm saying is this is what we've been trying to figure out, and I think where we have landed is that we actually can do both, and we should do both. Like we need to talk about the ways that the Biden team has helped shepherd this economic recovery. We can talk about that, even though there is inflation. We can still talk about is the greatest recovery we've ever seen. We can talk on and on about that, but we can't only talk about that. And my point is that you actually can do both. Like politics isn't solitaire, right? That's what Anat Shenker-Osorio always says. So you can't just expect to talk about your thing but when the other guys are talking about this other thing, if you don't address it, like you can't win, So I mean, my point is to resist that idea that, we just have to focus on these kitchen table issues because of your point. Number one, we don't have a good track record of doing that. But number two, like if we operate in that world and then they're operating in this other world, like we've already seen that movie. We saw it in Virginia. It did not work.
No,
So my point is, like, we can do both. We can address the culture in the contrast. So if we talk about if I'm saying, you guys, it's a 3-part approach. It's a start positive, it's a go negative, and then it's an end positive with the idea of like voters as the hero and like multiracial solidarity, right? It's pretty simple. You can literally slot any issue into that framework. That's what we've been finding. We've been testing it with abortion. We've done it with CRT. We've done it with trans kids. You can do it with any of this stuff. You talk about something positive that we're Democrats. This is what we're trying to do. And also, there's a lot more to do. You know, we're not done. Like, we've done a bunch of great stuff, but it hasn't been enough, and we need to do more. There's a contrast that comes in. It's like, and then they're trying to divide us by calling us pedophiles. Well, like, you know, we believe all of our kids should be able to be free, and you know, you can do it all actually together. There is a way to do it. You can use their division in the message to actually paint them as the kind of out of touch, extreme, you know, beholden to corporate interests party. Like, you can do both. And now, do you have to do that in every single message? Maybe not, but there is definitely a way that I think our overarching story should be something like that, right? Where it's like, this is who we are, this is what we're trying to do. The Republicans are out of touch, and they're like doing all of this kind of stuff. They're trying to distract you and divide you, from book bans to pedophilia to whatnot. But really, the bottom line is, they're just trying to hoard all the resources. They're not lifting a finger to help any of us. And you know what? Like, we're not standing for that. And we've come together across our differences before, and we're going to do it again. You know,
and your roads suck.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
And your roads suck.
Yeah, your roads suck, especially if you're in a GOP controlled, where Republicans have controlled the Michigan state legislature for like, I don't know, 20 years or something. So
exactly.
The one thing I took, you know, just so the framework you're laying out, and the way you're setting the scene, right? That's part of the problem, is that Democrats, I think, haven't quite set the scene yet.
Yeah.
And if you give people, if you get a framework and you get voters, you know, by routinely sort of pointing out what the Republicans are doing, eventually you can reduce it down to a sort of shorthand. And this is one of the things I took from the conversation we had with Professor Haney Lopez, was that at some point, you know, when they say pedophilia and when they say, you know, critical race theory and whatever, you can get to a point where you can kind of use the Gippers line of, oh, there they go again, you know, like, because once you've seeded the ground, right? Once you've given people and voters the context for how they're doing this whole thing as a distraction, so that they don't have to talk about the bad roads, you know, the fact that they're hoarding all the money toward the top, the fact that they've done nothing. Yeah, right. The facts they've done nothing, the fact that the healthcare costs are high, and the fact that they apparently now want to tax 100 million, you know, million working American families. Like, it's all a distraction. And once voters have that framework, it's really easy for them to spot it, right?
Totally.
But they just haven't built that framework.
Exactly. You nailed it, Carrie. That's exactly right. And I mean, this is where repetition comes in. Yeah, we're done. Well, we kind of did figure it out, but now we got to get the repetition, you know? Everyone needs to be saying it. Yeah.
I was going to ask, okay, great. Like, will Democrats, is there, in your work, are you getting a sense that Democrats are sort of receptive to this message and plan to adopt it? I mean, clearly not Jeffries.
Jeffries. Yeah, we need to work on Jeffries. Well, we have been trying. There is openness. I think there is openness to getting that this culture war stuff is a problem, and that it is going to bite them if they don't tackle it. And I don't know if we have time to go into their other bad habit, which was my colleague Leah Hendricks wrote about.
Go into it.
Politico, which is that they'd also their other tendency is to then kick the activists, you know, punch down instead of punching up. So that is what we're fighting. This tendency of like, oh, we're going to address culture change by being like, I love the police, I want to give the police more money, you know, like, no, that's not the right way to do it. So but to your point, like on the openness, I think there's openness. We've been having good conversations. Are they going to adopt it? I don't know. I think we have made some influence in some of the places where we've met with folks and they're like, okay, they see the research. It's really black and white, the numbers don't lie. So we have been really using, this isn't our opinion. This is literally black and white numbers showing that this works with this coalition that we're trying to move. So there's been openness. I haven't seen like a full adoption, but there's a lot of us who are out there saying this. And then the more of us who say it, I think there's a chance. I think, we also have to show. We also have to show by doing. So, we're trying to do that, and we're trying to build up an early campaign, like an advertising campaign that could go in the summer that would start to lay this groundwork. Again, we need to like lift the Democratic Party brand because it's not happening right now, and
Do you think you've made the inroads that when something like the January 6th report comes out,
right,
or when something like, we're coming up to that moment when where the Roe v. Wade decision is going to drop, that you can like reach out and say, hey, we've tested this and we have this memo ready to go, and just send it to them? Do you have that type of relationship? Well, that's good, because I guarantee you they're not sitting around right now. Most of them are not sitting around trying to figure out how they're going to capitalize on those moments, which just seems like political, malpractice to me. But I just can't imagine that they're doing it, because they would already be implementing what's in those messaging packets. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No. I think that's totally right. And that's exactly what we have been trying to do, capitalizing on these moments, and we'll continue to do. And we're also going to have to kind of do it ourselves in some way and show the way. But I feel like this cycle is really important for us to do that, to build towards the 2024 cycle. Like, we can't be figuring this out in 2024. We need to actually get alignment on this basic framework and sort of overall story that should carry us actually all the way through to 2024. It's not cute to keep reinventing a message. You just need to pick one and stick with it and repeat it. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, we're big critics of the traditional Democratic Party way they do advertising, right? Which is they hoard all this money and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars 3 weeks before the election, and poof, like nothing's been built, no message has been stuck, everything's hyper targeted, so there's no overriding message. And I like, my dream would be, there's a reason Coke and Pepsi and Ford spend money year round advertising at major events and major shows and sponsorships to create that brand. And the Democratic Party brand is trash. So why not spend that energy in a broad-based, values-based campaign to talk about what we are for? And but that's, I've never seen anything even remotely close to anything like that happening. It'd be great if you guys could
we're trying. We're actually trying that. That's what we're trying. We're going to do this summer messaging campaign where we're going to try that out and get some data back to show how this works, because then if that does work, we need to do it all throughout 2023 in the lead up to the next election. Like, that is you nailed the point. Like, we can't take an off day. And by the way, the conservatives don't. Like, they were spending on really good, really effective messaging throughout all of 2021. So I'm with you. I think it's a big gap, and we are going to try to work on it. So.
And they also have Fox News. So we're pretty much out of time. Unfortunately, time always flies when we're having these great conversations.
Yeah.
I'd like to give you a chance to let people know how they can, join your effort or help you do what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, like we said, waytolead.us, that's our PAC. We support candidates up and down the ballot who are kind of champions for us and who are championing these messages. We also fund groups, campaigns in swing states that are supporting those candidates. And then we're also going to be doing some of that ad buy messaging work through that PAC. So I think if folks want to get connected to that would be great. waytolead.us. Also, all this research that I've been talking about, I am very much a believer in open source and making it public. So we have a research hub online, and I created a special link for you all, that bit.ly /DKMMP for Midterm Message Project. So your listeners can check that out and access all of our memos and all of the deep dives if people want to really geek out. And then I would just encourage people to get involved locally. locally, right? Like, get involved locally however you can with a party, with campaigns. Find those organizations that engage like you all do, activists in swing states. Like, really do it, because it is going to take all of us to do this, not only with our dollars, but with our time as well, to win this election.
Let me just repeat that. Is that bit.ly.dkmmp? Is that what it was?
It was, bit.ly/DKMMP.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so
this is the most like together self pitch I think we've ever heard. That was fantastic.
It's good. We'll have her back. The link sealed the deal. The link sealed it.
Jennifer Fernndez Ancona, she is with waytolead.us. Join her and her team's effort to boost campaigns, candidates, and messaging in key states. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. That was amazing.
Thank you both so much.
Bye-bye. So Carrie, again, so waytolead.us is the PAC, and then bit.ly. I mean, I'm maybe are you guys familiar with bit.ly as a way to shorten links, and then /DKMMP midterm messaging project.
Yeah, and if you want it if you want to check out some of their findings and what conclusions they had based on polling, etc., that's the place to do it. I'm gonna go there.
Oh, I know you are. I know you are. I'm sure you're gonna be writing from it.
And then I'm gonna claim it's an exclusive. That's exclusive.
When we were talking about Jennifer coming on and talking about messaging, I was like, there's a lot of messaging gurus in the Democratic Party, and a lot of them basically they're just pulling stuff out of their head. Like, this is what I think. And so I was like, let's make sure, I wanted to make sure that there was like research and polling, because that's what's sort of critical. And I know we're very much, Daily Kos is a reality-based community. We have our own polling and survey data research firm. And it's good. I love people like this that are actually really looking for that empirical evidence. What is working? What is not? We're not going to pretend to know. We're going to go in with an open mind. We'll test these different messages out. Let's see if Democrats are pedophiliacs. Let's see if that works. We didn't ask her how that polled. And so I suspect probably not well. But it probably polls well with their people.
Right.
I mean, they can't get outraged about masks anymore and COVID restrictions and vaccination because for worse, we've given up on that. Politically, it's too much of a danger. So, Carrie, we're out of time.
I know. It just flew by.
So thank you, Carrie, for being such a great co-host. As always, thanks to the whole The Brief team, Walter, producer, Kara, and Dorothy and Carolyn. Thanks to Jennifer for joining us and having this incredible conversation. Please check her out at waytolead.us. And thank you, the viewer, the listener, and the reader, for being fellow travelers in this battle for our democracy. I don't think we're exaggerating when we say that this is an existential election. Our very future is at stake. And all you have to do is look at Ukraine and Russia to see what the alternative might be. So thank you so much for being part of this battle with us. Thank you for joining us this week, and hope to see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.